Good morning. So I watched the Donald Trump and the Zelensky thing, right? If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. And it's such a complex thing, right? That nearly in order, I claim my total ignorance of not just this situation, but the echoes of the past that we're seeing, right? And for people who are outside of the Ukraine, right, who are not watching this happen, right? They're not hearing of people they know being killed every day. It's like a Call of Duty game that we're watching, right? We're watching two fellas playing online together, trying to snipe each other out, right? And we don't really like one of them, or we're told that one of them is a really horrible person, so we want the other guy to win. And we don't seem to care how many times someone is killed, and because they'll respawn and go again, right? And I think we have that mentality when we're looking at this. But realistically, if we assess what has been going on over these last few years, right? And my point on that is that you can't just take it in isolation, right? You also need to look back on history, right? What are wars used for? And it's beginning to look like, and has looked to me for some time, that I think Smedley Butler I think he was high up in the American military, right? And he said that he wrote a book called War is a Racket. And he's essentially saying that it's a money generating system, right? And it is a racket catered to those who are in power with the ability to make decisions on war, that it'll go ahead, that it'll continue for a while, we'll draw this out. To what end, right? And you look at World War One, millions of lives and families ruined, right? Countries nearly ruined because of that war. Because you have generations of people that didn't get to pump their own human value into their own nation, right? So you can see the slow decay and then the just fall off of Western civilization following that war. And then that naturally leads into World War II, right? Because you create these obvious situations that Germans are going to rebel against, right? Where they're saddled with the debt of everybody. They have to pay everything, right? And then not only that, they want bases and stuff in this country. They want to colonize and occupy the country and cut up your country and redraw the maps and stuff, right? You put people in these nonsense situations that is guaranteeing that you're going to have in the next generation or two people growing up in the misery of what followed that war, and they're going to look at it and say, we want better than this. Like, this is misery. And you see that when you read anything about Weimar Republic or World War or Germany prior to Hitler's ascension and prior to World War II, right? The regularly heard thing of inflation being so high that the mark, their money, their currency, was so devalued that people had wheelbarrows full of cash that they were using to buy a loaf of bread. What country, what people are not going to stand up and say, look, we need to go another way here, right? And then you can get into the Foster Dulleses, right? These background characters, these shadow characters who are involved in law firms, whose law firms are representing German interests and American interests, right? And not just in Germany, but in the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Anthony Sutton wrote a great book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Where these revolutions are funded and backed, similar to what you're seeing in the Ukraine, right? They're funded and backed to play two sides off each other and cash in regardless of the outcome, right? That's assuming that the outcome is not already preordained, right? So that's where we are. And it's the same with Hitler and the rise of the Nazi Party, right? Funded by the Wall Street again. These same entities are backing these same wars, right? The same situations and scenarios that lead to these wars. these revolutions and these generational, it's mass murder. It's mass ritualistic killing is what it is. These wars are decided. There's a great book called Lord Milner's Second War, and that book gives the whole backstory of how these shady characters decide on there's going to be a war, who's it going to be against, how's it going to look, what do we need to do in order to create the social consensus around supporting this war. And that leads into the creation of Wellington House in England, right? The kind of precursor to the Tavistock Institute, which was essentially set up in order to manipulate and foster anti-German sentiment in order to get the English to back their government declaring a state of war against Germany in World War I, right? So this stuff is manufactured. And we only see the surface stuff, right? We only see the surface stuff. But this stuff is decided. It's built into a plan that this war needs to happen. Here's 7 steps that we need to take in order to make sure that that happens, right? Same thing with England, or same thing with World War II, right? And it's telling as well, because you hear the words of Winston Churchill, and he said in World War II, our objective is not to beat Germany, it's to destroy the German people, right? They're two very, very different goals, right? And David Irving highlights this in most of his books, right? But particularly with the Dresden bombing, whole city flattened in hours, people burnt alive and melted. That had nothing to do with the war. These are, by any standard definition, crimes against humanity, but you don't hear about that, right? Because the victor writes the story, right? His story, history. The winner writes the history. So these things are lauded as great things, right? But then you fast forward to today, and that's to not include the rest of these international skirmishes and wars that have gone on, right? The Saddam Hussein one, right? He has weapons of mass destruction. He's linked to Al-Qaeda and he's linked to Osama bin Laden. Therefore, 9/11 happened, so we need to go in and wreck Iraq. That turned out to be false. False. The original Gulf War, you had, was it a Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter coming up giving testimony that she had witnessed Iraqi soldiers just pulling babies out of incubators and just smashing them off the floor. That turned out to be false. These are all lies. They're all based on lies in order, what? To build a consensus and to dramatize actual real events and to falsify them in order to persuade people that going in and destroying peoples and a nation and overthrowing governments or kings or whatever it is, overthrown regimes, regime change, right? Which is going in and toppling a country. You've no business in there. You've no business in there. And it's the same thing happening here with Ukraine and Vladimir Putin and Russia, right? We seem to deny ourselves of the realization or the fact that USSR spread all the way into Poland, East Germany, right? Europe was cut, butchered up and redrawn, right? People who were from this nation overnight are now from a different nation. That's not right. Okay? USSR crumbles. NATO continually expand, right? The only thing standing in its way from sitting on Russia's front doorstep is Ukraine. In 2014, America are behind the overthrow of an elected president in the Ukraine to put in their guy, right? Russia's looking at that going, it has to be war, or Russia capitulates, right? And then at the same time, you see all of this anti-Russian sentiment of Putin's literally Hitler and he's the most evil man in the world, all that stuff. And some of that may be true, but you also need to entertain the idea that you might be lied to. Why? To start a war. To start a war. And we have no idea we really don't have any idea. To say you know is to be lying and deceptive to yourself, right? We don't have a full deck of cards here. Trump said to Zelensky, you don't have the cards here. We don't have them either. We've no idea of the background information and who's funded. We're getting an inkling into it, but who's funding what, right? Which of these factions of rebels are actually legitimate rebels and they're not just hired mercenaries funded and pumped into a nation to create instability, so then you can declare that, look, it's chaos over there, we need to step in and get rid of Assad, right? The Syria thing, he's using chemicals on his own people. False. Turned out to be lies. There's videos of these actors being staged and put into position, right? Crazy stuff. How much of that is real, I don't know. But you have to factor it into any serious conversation about these things. There's multiple layers of deception going on in these instances, right? You have to factor all of that into your thinking. You can't just cop out and say, oh, sure, Putin's a horrible person, isn't he? That doesn't get you anywhere. Because the same applies to Zelensky. What is he now? Is he in his 6th year of a 5-year reign, right? So he's essentially an unelected president of Ukraine. He is someone who is in office, who's overstayed his mandate and refuses to step down or have elections, right? And you can say, well, look, the country's at war, you can't have elections. Other countries have had elections during war, right? He's also killed journalists. What is Coach Red Pill, that guy, I forget his name now, sorry. But he seems to have been killed by the Zelensky's regime, right? Crazy, crazy stuff. He's after banning political parties, and you can understand maybe the practicalities of it. But still, you can either declare that he's a benign despot, right? A dictator who's not so bad, or he's a dictator that wants no competition. But either way, you have to factor in to your thinking his actions, right? That he has killed journalists, he has he's dissolved political parties, and he's in his 6th year of a 5-year reign. So he's not actually, he's outside of the parameters of being an elected president in Ukraine. What else do you want to call that? He's also forcing people to go to the front line and fight for the country, instead of pursuing all avenues of peace. Because he's cleaning up. He's getting probably $1 trillion at this stage, but he's getting billions and billions of euros. Where's that money going? Who knows? Is he a big kingpin that is manipulating Western nations? Doubtful. Look at his previous life. He's a comedian. He's a pop star kind of guy, right? He doesn't strike me as a warlord with any sort of gravitas to him. Even looking at him speaking and listening to him, there's nothing that draws you into him. You know, there's nothing that draws you into the man. He's not particularly articulate. You can say, well, look, he's speaking a different language. Of course, but even in that, there's nothing endearing to him. Do you know? But ultimately, none of that really matters because, again, to my original point, I don't think we realise how close we all were, and probably still are, to being engulfed in a war in Europe again. Why? Well, it looks pretty obvious that war has always been used to cover up massive amounts of criminality, right? And to open the gate for further criminality and expansive measures, right? To seep the fingers deeper into the pie of control, right? So I think that's what we're looking at. And then you start looking at what European leaders have been saying. And it's all 100% anti-Putin, anti-Russia. We love Ukraine. We're with Ukraine till the very end. And Micheál Martin has been banging that drum for the last few years of trying to get Irish people involved in that war. He's been trying and pursuing ends that will make it easier for him to send your sons and maybe daughters, to send your sons, to send your family members to fight in the fields of Ukraine. Make that make sense. Make that make sense, right? Get this comic book nonsense out of your head of these big supervillains that we need to fight at all costs, right, with a little bit of Marvel humour thrown in there. These are not serious people. As a human race, what are we looking at? We're looking at a potential World War III. I don't want that. I would much rather we spend our time learning from different nations, right? And doing whatever we can to make sure that we're not trying to mess with anyone else's country. Get all that stuff out. Go home, everyone. Sort your own stuff out. And let's see what we can build as human beings, right? Given our own fragrance, our own colour, our own nature, as distinct ethnic groups, what can we cultivate? What can we grow that is based on our own peculiarities, right? What can the Irish people manifest and grow and make into reality from their imagination, right? When we really apply ourselves and we're not burdened by the burdens or the weight of necessity, right? Of having to grind, having to spend all your time working in a job you probably don't like to make money that you see is not lasting you, to fund a life that just means you've enough to eat to get up and do the same thing the next day. The amount of time that you take for yourself is shrunk, right? You just don't have it. The last thing anyone needs is for Europe to explode into a world war. Not again. We don't need it. It's unnecessary. It can be argued it was never necessary. It certainly made a lot of people really, really powerful and wealthy and influential. And it has absolutely wrecked nations. Look at the state of Germany at the moment. Germany runs a great parallel with Ireland, actually, to be honest, because following World War II, Germany was cut into half, into 4 quadrants, actually, right? It was dissected and split up, eventually leading into the West Germany and East Germany, right? But they were still being run by former Nazi members. So the whole war, it wasn't even based on principle, right? Because the OSS, the United States, Russia, England, France, all these intelligence agencies put in place former Nazi members. Right? To run Germany. To continue on going. So they weren't averse to Operation Paperclip, bringing these people over to build rockets, to further psychiatric experimentation on people. So these things weren't built on principle. It wasn't, the thing you're told is all Nazis are horrible and bad and we cannot rest until we get rid of this evil off the face of the earth. Then why are these governments turning around and working with these people? It's a lie. You were told a lie, right? They'll sell you whatever they can in order to get you to believe that what they're doing is justified. Stop falling for it. Stop falling for it. Go back and read on about World War I and II. Read people that on the surface you go, Jesus, that's all crazy talk. Read that person anyway. Listen to what they're saying. Right? Listen to what they're saying. If you have the same law firms and the same international banks backing consistently both sides of the same war over the course of a century, why would you think this is any different? Why would you think this is any different? And why do you keep falling for it? These entities will continue selling you a lie. That is their right. That's their right. Any fool has the right to try and deceive you. It's up to you whether you buy it or not, right? And to be standing in a position now after totally ignorant of our own history, right? Totally ignorant of the machinations that go on behind the scenes of these things. As I said at the start, I'm totally ignorant of them. But I know enough to recognize a pattern, right? That lies. What is the first casualty of war is the truth. Of course, because it doesn't seem to be in humans' nature to go over and fight these massive nationwide wars and conflicts for the sake of he's a bad guy, right? That's childlike thinking. And the Zelensky thing and the Trump thing highlighted that. You're never going to stop the total destruction of generations of people by trying to get people to say, but sure, call him a murderer, call him evil, call him a murderer. You're not going to get anywhere with that, right? And to all the Western leaders and that are coming out now, bound down and declaring their eternal devotion to the Ukrainian cause, I wonder why. Because there's enough stories, people can call them conspiracy theories all you want. I call it speculation, right? There's enough speculation out there that there's been some very, very nefarious, dirty dealings going on in Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard spoke about that of these biolabs in the Ukraine. Putin has come out and said the same thing. People go, oh, well, look, she's obviously a Russian agent. Or maybe they're telling the truth. Right? It's worth investigating. What do we know about it? This implicates Hunter Biden and all this stuff. It implicates Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. You see how this thing starts reaching back into the pages of history now, right? And if you look back far enough, you'll probably see a straight continuation between that, the overthrow of the elected president in Ukraine in 2014. You'll probably see a straight continuation of that back into these law firms and back into these round tables, which created the groundwork and the environment for World War II to be accepted by people, right? So this is crazy stuff. And I wonder what the implications of this are going to be, right? Is this going to open up the door for Americans, again, play out the theatre, what you want? If you're in Trump's position, right, what do you want? If you're against World War III, you need to tarnish the image of Zelensky. You have to. Because we've been bombarded for years now with how great this guy is, how this guy is a modern-day Michael Collins fighting for freedom, right? This kind of thing. They play to each individual nation's sentiment, right? What do they need to hear about him in order for them to back him, right? And that's what we're sold as, that this guy is standing up against the big dog in the yard, right? Is that the case? Or is he someone who's been put in there and is heavily compromised and blackmailed in order to further the agenda of these shady entities behind the scenes, right? I would imagine so. So, given the unwavering and uniform support, these copy and paste messages on Twitter of "we stand with Ukraine, Russia's barbaric illegal invasion needs to end, with Ukraine forever, we love Ukraine, Zelensky," this kind of nonsense, right? So, what is going on there? What is the motivation behind all of this stuff? Is it dark money? Is it black ops? Whatever it is, I think Trump and Elon Musk and that will probably, they already have this information. I think they just can't throw it out into the public because people won't read it. They need to break it down piece by piece and show you, step walk you through this in the media, right? Or using the media. And then you get the bigger picture, right? But you need to be open to accepting the fact that you don't know everything about anything really, right? And you certainly don't know everything about everything. So you need to be open to the fact that you might have been lied to. And you also need to be brave enough and honourable enough to say, you know what, I fell for that. I fell for that. Jesus, how did I fall for that? If I fell for that, what other lies are there, right? You just need to. Because I don't fancy going fighting in the Ukraine for something that is half-hearted, misunderstood, complicated, nonsense, half-lies, doesn't benefit me in any way. Actually just has a detrimental effect on me and my people and my country. No thanks.